Alright, hi everyone. This is Daniel Gregg speaking, and I'm going to make a video for you. This time I got two cameras going at the same time, and so we can maybe improve the video making here, and you can watch me. Okay, so we're going to be in the Good News of Messiah here, and I put the URL up on the screen so you can download your free copy of it. Okay, so you follow this URL here, and there you go. It'll go straight to the website there, to the front page, where you'll see the Good News of Messiah. Alright, let's go back to the text here. Alright, so today I want to discuss one of the themes of the Good News of Messiah, namely, we have quite an apologetic explaining the meaning of the death of Yeshua, and it's not penal substitution. It's rather ransom and cleansing is the correct and biblical view. A person can only die for their own sins in the sense of the penalty. They can certainly die from somebody else's sin in an effort to do something about it, though. All right. So what I want to do is I want to look at Galatians 3:13 here. And I didn't necessarily write a whole lot of commentary on this verse. So probably some of what you're going to get here from me is going to be fresh in addition to the commentary that's already here. Okay, so we are focused on it here. The anointed ransomed us from the curse, the norm or the customary norm, having become a curse over us. Because it has been getting written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, in order that through the anointed Yeshua, the blessing of Abraham will have come to the nations, so that we will have received the promise of the Spirit through faithfulness. Okay, so the first thing we have to notice is the anointed one ransomed us from the curse. Okay, so the nature of a ransom is ransoms are given or collected by the counterparty that collects the ransom is evil, and the party that gives a ransom is somebody who wants to free somebody from something. Okay, so the ransom here is Yeshua's blood, and that's being given to free us from sin, to purge us from sin, to cleanse us from sin. And the counterparty here is the devil, which is holding people in bondage to sin, and who is exacting the price from Yeshua for attempting to deliver Israel. Okay, and so Yeshua is willing to put up with the price because the results are that his blood will then be available for the purging of the sins of the people. Okay, so ransomed us from the curse, the norm. Okay, so sin causes a curse, it brings about a curse. The original curse was due to sin, the curse from Adam's sin, and then from every subsequent sin brings destruction and death. Okay, so having become a curse over us. All right, so Yeshua definitely became a curse, but the question is who is doing the cursing? Okay, so the people regarded Yeshua as cursed by God. And for this, I want to refer to, let's see, I'm going to write down page 376 here. 376, because that's where we are, just to make a note of it. And we're going to go to page 421 here. 421. Okay, so now we're on page 421 here. And let's see here. Do we want to look at previous page? Yeah, we do. Okay, and we're looking at an inclusion of Isaiah 53 in the Good News of Messiah, and you can find it starting on page 421. And the reason I put it here is because it's so important. We had to make quite a few corrections in even the Hebrew text here. Okay, but this particular verse we're talking about is not so much as a correction, it's just what it says. Okay, and it says, we will have considered him being smitten, being struck by the Almighty, and being made to be afflicted. But he is being made to be wounded from our transgressions, being made to be bruised from our iniquities. So our transgressions and our iniquities are the cause of the injustice done to him. So our sin is the injustice happening to him. But we will have considered him being smitten, being struck by the Almighty. And this is the verb hashav here, and it means to think or to suppose or to esteem. And the idea we're getting here is that this supposition was incorrect. He wasn't being struck by the Almighty. He was being struck by the serpent, okay, on the cross, on the tree. And then God made use of it to provide cleansing for man's sin. All right. So we have in Isaiah 53 a prophecy that basically says that he's going to be regarded as smitten by God. And this is certainly the case with most of the people who saw his crucifixion, because they considered it just, because they were listening to the leaders or following the public opinion. But there are also many who considered it unjust. And this prophecy is even fulfilled in the church, because theologies of especially the Western church consider that he was struck by the Almighty, when in fact it was evil men that struck him. Okay, and God is making use of something that he knew would come to pass. And so he caused it to come to pass in a particular way. Evil was going to happen to the only kindred son when he entered the world. That was a given due to man's sin. Okay, all the Father did was shepherd or guide that evil into happening to a certain way, so that he could draw all men to himself and provide obvious and public cleansing, source of cleansing from sin. All right, so let's go back to the page I marked down here, page 376, I think. Yeah, say 376. Okay, and let's see here. Okay, so we see here. Okay, so we're just checking the time here. Okay, so the anointed ransomed us from the curse, the customary norm. So sin has become the norm. It's become the custom. All right, now I described the broader meaning of nomos in Greek before, and that's what we're seeing here. Let's see, okay, so let's see here. Having become a curse over us. So, if you consider two teams that are taking the field in a competitive sport, okay, and the teams are battling from some important title, then because one team is brave enough to go onto the field and challenge, the other team starts jeering the other team and insulting the other team to try to rile them up. So they're doing a good thing, competing for a cup. I mean, they're the team that deserves to win the cup, but they're being insulted so that they'll mess up. They're being cursed. So this is the sense of Yeshua becoming a curse over us. He came and subjected himself to a sinful world and the insults of men in order that he might deliver us. Okay, so this isn't the curse of God. Okay, so now let's read the next verse. Because it has been getting written, cursed is everyone who hangs on the tree. And so you see there, people would say, well, that's proof that he was cursed of God. But there's some very important points I would like to make. First of all, Paul is quoting his own version here, okay? The Hebrew text for this verse reads one way, and the Septuagint reads another way. So first, let's discuss the Hebrew text in Deuteronomy 21:23, and really we have to go back to verse 22 to get the context. And the ki yihyeh ba'ish heta mishpat mavet. Okay, so if a man has committed a sin, having a judgment of death, okay, or deserving death, and he is put to death, and you hang him, okay, and you have hanged him, vitalita, him on a tree. Okay, so that's a condition that's being set up, and a man whom is a judgment of death, okay, mishpat mavet, or actually I should pronounce that mawet. Okay, so let's go to the next verse here. His body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but sure. Okay, so burying, you will bury him. Okay, kavor, tikbarenu. Okay, and burying you shall bury him, bayom hahu, that day, kilat, so accursed. Okay, and that's a construct of God. Elohim is talui. Okay, literally one being hanged. Okay, so this is a call passive participle, so that you do not defile the land. Okay, so this phrase is definite. Now, according to the context, the one who is accursed is the one in whom is the sin of death. Okay, in other words, he has to fulfill the condition of being guilty of the sin for which he is being tried in order to be accursed. All right, so if somebody is not guilty, then they're not cursed. And in fact, let's look at, let's see, a little bit of my research here, just confirm it. We want to pull up this. Okay, so we're going to pull some information out of the Google AI here. Okay, and here's, if you ask the question the right way to the AI, it'll give you the answer. Now, I should probably mention a few things before we talk about that. And that is, the Septuagint says, in the Greek Septuagint, it says that all who are hanged on a tree are cursed of God. Okay, so the Septuagint appears to have added something that's not there in the Hebrew, namely the word all. Okay, and to give you an example, the Septuagint can often do things like this. When it comes to defining blaspheming the name, according to the Septuagint, just to say the name or utter it is to blaspheme it. But according to the Hebrew text, it's not just uttering the name. You have to profane the name, okay, in order to blaspheme the name. All right, so the Septuagint has tweaked it a little bit according to tradition or mistake or whatever, and made it say something that the Hebrew really doesn't say. So what the Hebrew is saying is, it's not saying all who are hanged or cursed. It says the one in whom is the judgment of death. Okay. And the Septuagint says all who are hanged on a tree. Now, when Paul quotes, he's quoting the Septuagint, but he omits the words of God. He just says, cursed is the one who's hanged on the tree. He doesn't say, cursed are all who hanged on a tree. He doesn't say of God. So, of course, all who are hanged on a tree in a judgment or a display are cursed by somebody or regarded as a curse by somebody, namely the people who are doing the hanging or who think it's being justly done. But that doesn't mean everybody. It just means that all who are hanged on a tree. It doesn't mean all the people who see it hanged on a tree consider that person cursed, because the person might be innocent. Okay, so Paul has omitted the words of God when he's quoting the Septuagint, and that reflects a knowledge of the Hebrew and of the situation to omit those words. So now we can look at what our glorified search engine pulled up here. Okay, so we're starting over again here with a new file. So we have a 20-minute limit. Okay, so now we're both going, both the bars are going and everything. Okay, so the question I asked the AI, and you have to construct your question carefully, and I also did all of this research before without the AI in years past. This AI is just very good at dredging it up again, okay, because it's very good at finding things if you know what to ask it. In Deuteronomy 21, so this is my question here, okay. In Deuteronomy 21 it says, one is accursed of God who is hanged on a tree. It appears from the context, however, that only the man in whom is a sin for the judgment of death is accursed of God if he is hanged on a tree. The Septuagint, or the LXX, seems to say all who are hanged on a tree are accursed of God. But the Hebrew lacks the all, and Paul omits the of when quoting it in Galatians. All might make sense because somebody, i.e. those who do the hanging, consider the person cursed. But it doesn't have to be God. Has anyone noticed that Jesus might not have been cursed by God, but only by those hanging him? Okay, now by Jesus I mean Yeshua, of course, but since I'm talking to the AI here, or asking a search engine, I'm using the common form of the name. Okay, so the answer is yes, several scholars and theologians have observed exactly what you noted regarding the nuance in the language of Deuteronomy 21:23 and Paul's specific rendering in Galatians 3:13. Okay, in the original Hebrew context of Deuteronomy 21, 22 to 23, the curse is not necessarily inherent to the act of hanging itself. Rather, it applies to a person who has already committed a sin worthy of death. The hanging was a post-mortem public display of the existing accursed state to warn others and satisfy justice. All right, so Paul's omission and theological distancing. Now, the AI is going to read some penal substitution theology into the matter here, so we can kind of ignore it on that because I've already explained that. But it's still saying that Paul omitted the and didn't say of God. Okay, cursed a man cursed by God. All right, so there are other arguments here. Now, so this prompted a second. Thought I should find out what the Jewish opinion was. So I said, yes, did the Jews ever argue that someone unjustly hanged on a tree wasn't cursed of God? The answer is yes. Jewish tradition and scholarship have deeply explored the idea that the curse in Deuteronomy 21:23 is not necessarily a divine condemnation of the individual's soul, especially in cases of injustice or specific crimes. So that's exactly what I concluded before. If it was unjust, then the curse doesn't stick. Maybe only in the minds of those who are committing the injustice. All right. So the Jewish scholarship does have some insight on this. Rashi considers the curse of God is actually a degradation or insult to God. Okay. The parable of the twins. Rashi cites a Talmudic parable about twin brothers, one a king and the other a bandit. When the bandit is hanged, onlookers see the family resemblance and might say the king is hanging. Okay, so the point here is that because man is created in the image of God, and the image of God has been put up on a tree, it's insulting to God to leave it there, surely to the point where it might become degraded or damaged. Okay, even though Yeshua's image was damaged even before the sun went down. Okay, but to let it go on for too long was considered also an insult to the land. Okay, so that's one thing. Now it's an interesting interpretation, but we don't necessarily have to subscribe to it. I think primarily in the Hebrew it does mean that the one who is has a sin of death in them, guilty of death, because they sin, then if when they're hanged, they're cursed when the judgment is executed. Okay, so the Qumran skulls considered it a traitor. It was connected with blasphemy, and so on. So a summary of the Jewish perspectives here. Okay, so let's go back to our text here, the Good News of Messiah. And because it's been getting written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. Okay, which means that somebody regards the person as a curse. Okay, and Yeshua is cleansing our sins through his blood. In order that through the anointed Yeshua, the blessing of Abraham will have come to the nations, so that we will have received the spirit of the promise through faithfulness. So in order to be faithful, we have to be purged from the sin. We have to be cleansed from sin, and we can't receive the promise without that operation happening. Okay, so Yeshua ransomed us from the curse. Sin is the source of the curse here. Sin is the reason that Yeshua was attacked, but he was doing it to cleanse us from sin. Not to pay a wrath debt off to the Father. So I hope you've seen the possibilities of interpreting the text differently here than the mainstream church usually teaches, and have a blessed day. Daniel Gregg, over and out.